Hello and welcome to A Doctor's View, a podcast discussing everyday topics in health, fitness and mental well-being, as well as providing an insight into medical life and its challenges. Please note that all opinions are my own and should not replace the advice given to you by your own doctor. I'm Dr. Bolivios. Let's begin. Hello everyone, welcome to Doctor's View. I'm Dr. Bolivios. A quick update, I'm still in a hotel room, a Premier Inn to be precise, which is where I'm currently staying whilst I'm working on a COVID-19 intensive care unit. I thought it would be a good idea to discuss some of the different strains and stresses that we're facing on the front line and also other key workers too, and some of the things we need to be looking out for in others and also ourselves whilst we're working in such a harsh environment. And helping me to do that is Amandip Sidhu of Doctors in Distress, and Amandip and I have done a few episodes already on burnout. And also joining us is Dr. Katie Carpenter, who is a newly qualified doctor, and she joins us for the first time to talk about some of the things that medical students have been asked to step up and help with, as well as some of the support networks that are out there too. So Amandip, if we could start with you, if you could quickly introduce yourself and explain to listeners your role for those listening for the first time.
Thanks, Paul. Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining this podcast. So I have appeared on the show before, I think a couple of times, Paul. We've done a one-to-one and a three-way talk on burnout. So I'm really looking forward to this podcast and hopefully, share some good thoughts and practices going forward. So just as a quick reminder, I'm the founder of the charity Doctors in Distress, which came into existence in the middle of last year, 2019. The story behind it was actually inspired by my brother, who was a doctor. He was a consultant cardiologist, and he very sadly passed away in November 2018 after having taken his own life. The circumstances around that were primarily due to a heavy workload, which then contributed to a phase of burnout, and most likely, a very, very acute very quick and severe episode of depression, which probably, was a major factor in him taking his own life. And one of the reasons I started up the charity was to really sort of use the case to highlight some learnings, both for the profession and the health system, but really to raise awareness of the positive value of positive mental health for doctors for the foreseeable future, to make sure that doctors don't succumb in the way that my brother did, and make sure that self-care is of paramount importance. So doctors' health and well-being is a very, very important topic and something I feel very passionate about. And I welcome any opportunity to really help and guide anyone facing distress. But enough about me. I'll maybe hand over to Katie, and she can talk a little bit about herself and a little bit about the work that she does at Doctors in Distress as well.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for having me. My name is Dr. Katie Carpenter. As a couple of days ago, we had a virtual graduation ceremony today, which involved 220 of us logging onto Zoom in homemade mortarboards. And we had a speech from our programme director, and they read out all of our names individually. So congratulations to all of my peers. I joined Doctors in Distress recently, and Amandip and I are united by the fact that we both lost our siblings to suicide. I lost my sister in 2015. So I suppose for me, going forward and joining the NHS, I am acutely aware of mental health. And we will be joining the NHS in the front line and walking into the fire that is COVID-19. So prevention of suicide is something that's really close to my heart, and I'm really, really aware of how we must support each other very much. And I'm looking forward to joining you guys out on the front line.
Thank you both, and congratulations, Katie, for graduating. I didn't realise it was over. It was a virtual ceremony you had. Yes, we've all been involved, and I know you guys have been very proactive with the charity, and obviously supporting doctors in distress, as it's so aptly named. We're now in a position where we're facing something that we haven't seen before with regards to COVID, and just the sheer volume it's putting and stresses it's putting on on not only the hospitals but also the teams working within the hospitals. And this doesn't just mean doctors, it actually means everyone from, the security guards all the way through to, the lead intensivists. And we just sort of wanted to get together to have a discussion about some of the stresses we think that can be managed and how best we can do that. Amandip, is there anything you have a thought on in that regards?
Yeah. So just before I sort of touch on that, and I think again, I'm not a medic. Just for anyone sort of new to this podcast series, so I guess I wear the hat of a member of Joe Public, and I think something that's really positive that I've seen in the past few weeks is really, I guess, a change of culture amongst the society and the public generally towards everyone in the NHS. And you mentioned, not just doctors, nurses, but really any and everyone who sort of works in our health service. I think that's a very, very good step in the right direction to really raise even more awareness of the value of, positive health, and particularly in the time of stress. I think some of the things that we've seen, particularly here at the charity, is, and I think it's worth understanding, as I said, the charity's been going about a year or so. And at that point, and even in the preceding years before that, I think the health system was really sort of quite resource constrained and, really at stretching point at that point before even COVID kicked off. Now that we've obviously seen, the crisis unfold, and, at the time of filming this, in the early days of April, it's expected, really to get worse. I think one of the concerns I have is the pressure points on the staff whilst dealing with this, will certainly become more intense. I think, again, I haven't worked directly in the health system, but I'm snippet of info, but I'm also a registered NHS volunteer, and I've offered to step up again and do that same service in the coming weeks. Is sort of, I think the mood amongst the staff now is, of course, the COVID-19, although a very, very, negative scenario, I think in a slight positive way, it's focused everyone's efforts and attentions on making sure that it's dealt with. And a part of that, I guess, coming along with that, and as I see it, a bit like a wave on an ocean heading towards the beach, is to make sure that the staff are looked after and able to care able to care for patients in the best possible way. It's a shame something like this has happened to really sort of drive that culture change, which is something that we've been campaigning for ever since we came into existence. But it's good small steps going forward. And, some of the positive things that we've seen are, for example, clapping on a Thursday, which we've all joined in. I think that's a great step. But again, on the flip side, some of the chatter that I hear and see is a lot of medics probably feel, and I'll maybe look to you guys to maybe sort of, debate this. But I think whilst the intent is very, very good, I think a lot of medics are really in the position of saying, right, we really value your support, but there are other ways that you can help us to help you, such as basics, allowing us to shop in shops and not clearing stock off the shelves so we can eat and feed and clothe ourselves properly. When you are in a hospital environment, for whatever reason, is to be a little bit more understanding and patient with those around you, and particularly the staff that are treating you. But fundamentally, and I've come to learn this very, very quickly, is that the way to sort of keep an NHS workforce happy, in particular doctors, for the purpose of this conversation, is to essentially give doctors the tools they need to do the job. So, we've heard lots of chatter about PPE, for example, but even just somewhere to sit down and just rest and offload. We've seen in recent months and years the real lack of, offline spaces. And I think, there has been a change in that tide of, providing safe spaces for staff just to sit and share. So I think, there's been lots, very, very positive change going forward. It's a shame that COVID, I think, has actually driven that. But, I think the net effect that we'll still see in a few weeks and months' time, and hopefully will embed itself as a permanent culture going forward, is around the need to sort of, care for those that care for us and look after each other.
Thank you, Amandip. That's a very nice summary of everything that's gone on. And I have to echo everything you've said. Completely agree. The changes that we've seen just in terms of attitudes, it has been immeasurable. And it is not just with the public as well, but I think actually within the hospital as well, I'm noticing the different specialties acknowledging what everyone does, and not just within the actual doctors and nurses on different wards, but actually different sectors within the hospital. And you're taking note of what the cleaners do. You're taking note of what the receptionists have to go through, what the secretaries have to go through in terms of organisation, and trying to, because we've, like I'm sure with many hospitals, have had our rotas changed to try and cope with this, and just the speed at which it's done, and just how, okay, some problems, teething problems, as but together we formulated a good solution, and just the level of admin that this involves, and not just from one or two people, but it is a whole collective effort, and it's made different people within the hospital, different tiers, acknowledge all these different things, and I think that's, it is a positive. It, like you say, it is sad that it's taken COVID to reveal all of this, or to make people change their mindsets, but absolutely. And I don't know, Katie, what things have been like from a medical school's perspective. You've just qualified a couple of days ago, but in the last run up to the graduation, anything that you've noticed?
Well, I think we all have similar thoughts about becoming a doctor. The transition from student to doctor was always going to be a big one. It was always going to be challenging and at times scary, especially now that we've got this situation that we're coming into. However, what's been done is the medical school has liaised with the General Medical Council and the Medical Schools Council, and they've created a new job for us, and it's called an FIY1 post, and it means Foundation Interim Year 1 post. So we're able to take up an interim job in between now and starting our official jobs in August. And I think the fact that they've given it a new name and a new title recognises the fact that we might need a bit of a more gentle push into the job, as it's all happening so quickly and we finished uni just a couple of weeks early. I think also support has been shown by the university, because when you graduate, normally you kind of cut ties with them. But our university at Bristol, they're extending their support to us while we become doctors up until the end of July. So I think it's really brilliant that it's being recognised that although, we're itching to get started and we're so ready to help, we are going to need as much support as we can get to do so.
That's fantastic to hear that the university is still supporting you up until, later on, which is, something that I qualified 10 years ago, and I don't ever remember anything like that. So that's wonderful. And in terms of your first jobs and where you're going to be placed, has that changed in any way, or have you been assigned certain posts already?
So it's all in the pipeline. I think it's not something that could happen, just overnight, because we have to start in a safe way. We need to have inductions. And it's really good that that's been recognised as well. But we're getting information and updates all the time. I suspect that next week we will apply for these jobs, and within a couple of weeks, I think we'll be working. And they've allowed us to either start work in the area that we train, so at our medical school, or we can apply to the new area that we're going to start work in August. So either one of those.
Fantastic. And also, I've read many articles and reviews about medical students helping out with childcare and all these things, and just volunteering their services in their last year. And that thing, that's just an incredible thing, and it's phenomenal, all the different support that the NHS has been receiving, from soon-to-be doctors, but also people that were doctors in training even from their first year. Just anything we can do to help, and I'm sure you've noticed that from within your med school too.
Yes, absolutely. So as well as us fifth years being able to graduate early, I know that the third and fourth years, they have official roles where they can volunteer. I have friends who babysit formally and informally for NHS workers, but also other workers, shop workers, police, ambulance crews, they all need childcare, etc. So it's really great that we're able to help out in any way.
Oh, it's amazing. Amandip, I just wanted to rack your brain around a couple of things, because obviously, as we said, we are in a very difficult position now, or a different position than we've ever faced before. And we've had our discussions before on burnout and how much it affects people within medicine, and just key workers in general, people that do have stressful jobs, but particularly we've spoken about it within medicine, and we noticed things were getting worse before any of this started, and we were trying to raise awareness and everything. How do we deal with things now? Because we're going to need support more than ever, and just from working in that environment myself, it's a stressful environment, as you can imagine, and it's surrounded by unpleasant things. Is there anything you can advise anyone listening who's faced in that position?
Yeah. Thanks, Pauline. And you raised some good points there. So I think the first thing I would urge everyone to really sort of think about, and it's a very obvious thing, but I think it needs to be said. I think on the topic of burnout, I think now more than ever, the risk of burnout is going to be very, very high, particularly those dealing directly on COVID, such as your good self. And it's important to just recognize that, once this virus is dealt with over the next few weeks, if not months, that perceived risk is going to be very high. And I could imagine that, as you say, dealing with very unpleasant things, there's a lot of very, very, unwell people that really are, between life and death, and seeing that, on a day-by-day basis, hour after hour. And I sort of liken that to very much and I try to say this very sensitively out of respect for the people that have sadly succumbed to this, is very much a conveyor belt type of approach, because as far as I can see from the outside looking in, that's going to be the approach, the medical approach to sort of dealing with this. And I think the people on that conveyor belt, treating those patients will, what you'll see day to day will either, make your sensitivities and emotions even more heightened, or invoke another human emotion to sort of numb yourself to that. And I think those two things are probably not in their own right or wrong ways that our psyche will deal with issues like that, but they can spiral into, the first episodes and first traits of burnout. So that will be really one of the first things that I would recommend, is just to urge people to really remember that. I think the second thing I'd want to really impart to anyone listening to this podcast is, whilst in those scenarios, you all have the support of Joe Public, and for all the key stakeholders, government, employers, etc. So the goodwill of society and people is there to support you. So I would try and use that goodwill to keep going as best as you can. But it's perfectly fine to reach a point where you just need to stop. You need to just chill out. You need to offload, because nobody can be asked to be, to work in an environment that really stretches their mental well-being. And everyone has different limits. Everyone has different parameters, and that's totally fine. What may be acceptable to one person may not be acceptable to another. And I think, having been through burnout myself, one of the first things that my psyche did, and a lot of people do in those risky times and heightened times, is to benchmark your performance against others. So I think it's important not to fall into that trap, to make sure that one's own health and well-being is looked after. Having said that, I think the third thing I want to impart to people is that, once you find that you're in sort of a place where one of the key markers, I think, is not being able to switch off. And I appreciate it must be incredibly hard, witnessing people literally on life support and, sedated, who are, you're not even sure are going to make it through the night. It's important. It's very, very difficult, I know, to switch off and not think about that, all night, and, certainly throughout, the downtime that you have until your next shift. But just remember that, I think this, as I said earlier, this virus has focused everyone's attention, and hopefully the level of resource is going to get in place very, very soon, quickly. So, please trust your colleagues. Please trust those people around you to pick things up from you. And equally, when it's time to, clock on for the next shift and take things back, it's all about a team effort. So, if you do feel isolated, if you do feel as though that the world is crashing down on you and you're all alone, value the teamwork, value the collaborative effort, and it's perfectly fine in any circumstance, not just COVID-19 crisis mode, but at any point say, look, I need some help. I need to have a bit of downtime. I need to just step away and just make sure you look after yourself and nourish your body as well as your mind in that regard.
Thank you, Amandip. From my perspective, the few things I've noticed, firstly, the support that we have for each other at the moment is absolutely astronomical, at least in my place of work, in terms of people are helping each other in so many ways, even just a simple, have you worked too much? We can swap some shifts, or, helping with child's care and all these little things, even people are volunteering to bring in coffee machines, bringing cake, just to help with morale, just these small things. But these are things that we're obviously very pleasant to each other before, but never before have I seen such camaraderie within a hospital setting.
Yeah, sorry, Paul. Can I just cut in? So I think the point you're trying to make, and apologies if I'm cutting too much, but
no.
It means something now.
Yeah,
it actually means something now, and I think that's the critical thing. I think the actual meaning behind it is not just a lip service. It's not just a tick box exercise. What you're saying and what I'm hearing as well, through my work and my personal experiences, it actually means something. And I think that's one of the key messages that people should take away from this podcast. So I think that's immensely rewarding and encouraging for all. But sorry, I cut across.
No, not at all. You're absolutely correct. It does mean something. We won't be. We're not taking anything for granted at the moment. Anything, any niceties, we actually think, oh, that's so nice. Yeah, that will really help. And one of the biggest issues, or one of the things that I can see being the biggest issue in terms of burnout, is not only just being surrounded by obviously unpleasant things like we've said, and just being in a stressful environment, but from my perspective, it's the not being able to be the doctor that you want to be and that you've been trained to be. And what I mean by that is, we're in a situation now where you're unable to talk to relatives to the same degree because they're not allowed to visit. You're in a very difficult position where you have to allocate time slots to speak to people who are obviously very concerned about their loved ones, and even at times where they are really not doing well, you can't console them in the way that we're used to and accustomed to, and how we're not just trained to, but even just from a humane perspective. And that's quite difficult, at least I found. And I think that's one thing. And the other thing is we've got to care for our patients, and we look after ourselves and each other within the hospital as best we possibly can. But behind each one of those visors, then we've seen many fabrications of them over the last week or so on the news and in social media and things. Behind every mask, every visor, there is a person there, but not just a person. There is a family behind that person. And from a personal perspective, and I don't feel I'm alone in this, one of the biggest concerns actually is not so much what if I catch this, what if I become sick with it, it's what if I pass this on to my family, what if I inadvertently cause harm to someone that I care about, or even someone that I have never met. And it's that's quite a big thing to keep going through your mind, I think. And they're the things that I think are going to be the biggest obstacles or hurdles, that people are going to have to come to terms with within a hospital setting. Katie, I don't know if you have anything from the side of a medical student. I know, obviously, newly qualified, and I know you haven't had much experience on the wards as such yet, but obviously you have in your clinical placements. But you obviously go through quite a lot of communication skills and all these different trainings within the university, and all of a sudden not being able to sort of carry out those tasks. I don't know how you'd feel about that.
Well, I suppose from my point of view, I can only reiterate what you both have said, and said very well. I think we're kind of talking about the topic of resilience, aren't we? And resilience is drummed into us from day one of medical school, be a resilient medical student, be a resilient doctor. And of course, we all have stressful days. You come home, the advice is to do some yoga, to have a drink with a friend, have a nice meal. And I am the first person to do all of those things, probably all at once. But I think a huge part of resilience is actually being self-aware, and that your reaction reflects the gravity of the situation that you're in. Have you just had a single bad day, and do you need to de-stress? Or is this prolonged stress? Is this stress in its most serious form, which Amandip has talked about, which is burnout? And I think if you feel that you are in the more severe end of stress, having the voice to speak up, having the confidence to say, no, I think this is wrong, or this system is wrong, or the rota's wrong, and also feeling that you're able to do so and not feel ashamed and not feel guilty, you absolutely must say. And I think one of the things that we can do to achieve that is even just turning to your colleague and just saying, have you had a good day? And you saying that to someone might be just what that person needed to say, actually, I'm really unhappy with this situation. And I think, as you've both said, I think it is a real shame that it's taken this global crisis to kind of get this sense of community. But I think it is one of the positive things that will come out of this once we're out the other side, which will be a good thing.
Yeah, I think the self-awareness thing is absolutely paramount, and I completely agree with you. Amandip?
Yeah, I mean, nothing much more to add, but Katie, just moving, I guess, the sort of the conversation on, and I'd say, I know we spoke very briefly before this podcast about some of your hopes and aspirations and hesitations and anticipations about, I guess, your first few days. But maybe you could just talk us through, or just remind me what we spoke about in terms of, I guess, what you're expecting to face. I know that we've touched on a few things already, but it'd be great just to get some thoughts on behalf of your peers and your cohort about what to expect, what you think will work well, what you think won't work well, and just some general thoughts about your first anticipated days in sort of the middle of a very unusual way to start your medical career.
I think unusual is the way to describe it, and we're never going to start in the way that it was meant to start. And when you join somewhere new, I know that most of the hospitals have lots of welcome events and socials, and I think that will still happen. But of course, now it's on a background of COVID-19, and all of our electives were cancelled, and we're not starting in the way that we were expecting to start. However, this is the situation that we're in. And I think I can speak on behalf of all of my year. We're excited to start. There's nothing more that we want to do than kind of get in there and help everyone. It's what we've trained to do so for 5 to 6 years. So we are looking forward to it. But of course, I think we've all got that background nervousness. We don't know anyone. Most of us are starting in hospitals we've never been to. So we've kind of got to take all those emotions and take that forward to do the best that we can in the situation that we're in.
I know what you mean when you say excited to help. You want to help, and I do completely understand that. And I think it's a testament to your cohort, and it's a testament to, I think, the type of people that go into healthcare. I've spoken to nursing staff. I've spoken to cleaners. I've spoken to people who are behind the desks in receptions, and the general sense is everyone just wants to help and is willing to go forward and to try and ease the pressure on everyone else. And I know we've said this before in terms of it's a lovely sense of camaraderie and things, but it is nice hearing it from new people as well, and knowing it's not just isolated within a certain pocket within the country. It seems to be completely global. So thank you. Yeah. Amandip, is there anything you wanted to add to that in terms of, I know we've spoken a little bit about some of the issues that we could face within the hospital setting, and why people may be experiencing higher levels of burnout than before, especially building on top of what is already quite a big problem, as we both know, or we all know, sorry. And is there anything you think we can do to try and ease some of this? And I know Katie mentioned self-awareness, which I think was a fantastic point.
Yeah, I think on the self-awareness, I'll maybe just broaden that definition out a little bit more. And I think we've spoken about this many times in various conversations, but self-awareness also includes peer awareness, because as we all know, doctors are notoriously bad notoriously poor at looking after themselves. And, I remember my brother even sometimes telling me that his badge of honor for the day was, not eating or drinking or even urinating for a whole day. And whilst at the time that can appear very, alpha male and macho, which was actually quite, in some ways, opposite to my brother, but, very common amongst the medical profession, whatever gender you are. I think, now more than ever, that sort of peer awareness and self-awareness is really quite important. And, we've talked about double taps before. So if you see a colleague, under pressure or suffering, it's perfectly fine to reach out. Look, are you okay? And I know you're going to say you're fine, but when you're ready to talk, let's check in and let's have that conversation. So I think it's an unknown time for everyone going forward. But again, speaking as a member of Joe Public, I think the enormously gratifying thing is the level of public support, and that'll be something to help people power through and motivate through. But something I saw on social media was as well as the clapping, we also need practical support as well. So it's great that doctors and nurses and other healthcare professionals are getting deliveries of food and gifts, etc. But the really slight disappointing thing I've seen outside of that is in supermarkets, and I know some are better than others at helping NHS workers shop and get the essentials that they need. But I mean, I've heard stories of I'm still trying to process and understand what this means, but certain NHS workers in uniform being, spat at, for example, which really surprised me. And I'd be keen to understand why the public thinks that's actually going to help them care for us, because I think that's something that, on the face of it, as I verbalise it, although it sounds quite vulgar and crude, if it is true indeed, and I'm sure it is, but, I would just ask, there is a huge role for the public to play here, just beyond, I guess, public shows of appreciation. But if anyone can actually step in and help volunteer, whatever role that may be. And you mentioned some great points earlier, Paul, that, everyone has a role to play, whatever background or level of qualification or, however many letters you have after your name, everyone has a role to play in helping society get through this. So those are only, I guess, some of the comments that I would add to that in response to your question there.
Thank you. There is something that I wanted to ask you, even actually before this podcast, just to get an insight into your professional opinion regarding this, actually, because as you know, we've spoken a lot about this in the past, and we've spoken a lot about how it is always okay to admit that you're not well in terms of you're feeling the strains of things. And we've always promoted the idea of going to your seniors and saying, I'm struggling, and that it's not a black mark against you, and that this is something that not only saves lives, it saves your own health as well. The reason why I wanted to talk to you about this is because we're now in a situation where even I've seen, and even myself, when you think you're getting symptoms or you've been exposed, and you don't know whether you need to take time off work to be self-isolating, and even then you start feeling really very guilty about not helping your colleagues and not being on the front line and not doing all these things. So my point is, what's going to happen now, and what do you advise people? Because there's going to be a time where say if you are suffering from burnout in this complete thing that we've never experienced before, and you're also suffering with that level of guilt of, I can't say anything, everyone else is having to go through the same thing. What do I do? And I know personally, I think my advice would be, it's still burnout, it's still stress,
Mm-hmm.
it's still something that needs to be addressed. And you know what? You're going to be no good to anyone if you know you're not able to function properly, and also if you're not able to have the mental well-being to do so. And I wanted to know what your thoughts were on this.
Yeah, no, that's a good question, Paul, and a great point. And I think, and you say my professional opinion, but I'll give it as a humble taxpayer and member of society. But I think, well, yeah, we'll move over the taxpayer bit for now. But the only sort of immediate case that I can relate it to is my brother, and there are several conundrums and levers to pull here, I think. And the first one is, the message and logic is right, that if you're burnt out, you are usually in a state of high functioning anxiety before you completely collapse. So although you can feel as though that you're conquering the world and you're curing every patient and doing XYZ, very, very soon your world can, without intervention, collapse. Now, at that point of collapse, which is I think what happened to my brother, one of the first messages that he got in his brain internally was, because you cannot now practice as a doctor, you are a failure. And I think that's what really tipped him, and likely others, over the edge, because he felt, like many doctors, as you all do, that you dedicated your lives to this vocation, and if you cannot practice and execute that vocation, you no longer, in essence, exist as a person. And that was one of the major factors, I think, that led to my brother taking his own life.
Yeah.
So I think in response to your question is hopefully that stigma is breaking. So I think hearing things like, or thinking things like, if you need to get better before you can look after patients better, I think whilst that has the right intent, it can sometimes have a very damaging effect. Particularly if one is right at sort of the latter or the peak stages of burnout.
Yeah.
So I think the way to avoid that is to really try and understand that, look, one's perception of their capabilities whilst being burnt out or at times of stressed can be distorted. If there were any particular issues, I think, around treating patients or the level of capability, it's absolutely admirable to push through and work hard, because fundamentally, medical students and whatever grade you're at now, it's something that you're taught from day one to power through times of struggle, to power through times of difficulty. But when you reach the point that you either feel that you cannot power through that or don't have the energy to power through that, it is absolutely perfectly fine to say, look, I need to recharge myself first. And I think that's one of the key messages in response to your question is, and it circles back to what we said earlier, it is perfectly fine to just say, look, I need to just stop. And I think in the times that we have now, I think there's even more of a focus, I think, particularly with the management culture within the NHS, that actually allows that to happen and forgiving. And you mentioned a scenario where if somebody is physically infected as well. I think, again, one of the points I want to try and iterate from this and previous podcasts is that mental health and physical health are exactly the same. So we should be looking at somebody who has COVID for fear of hurting others or infecting their loved ones and families or themselves, equally with their own sort of state of mental well-being and personal health, from a mental health perspective, in the same regard. But that I guess is sort of my sort of initial thoughts and as you say, professional opinion on that. But Katie, I don't know if you want to add any more, because I know this is a topic that you've researched and read about and know about quite well.
Well, I think you've said it all really well. I think a lot of the issues come from that a lot of us medical students and doctors, we do tend to have quite perfectionistic personalities. And I think once you come to a point where you feel like you can't work anymore, it kicks in of, no, I've got to power through, no, I can do this. And you've said it, of course we know deep down that a week 2 weeks, a year, whatever it is, off work is obviously going to be so much better than you either not doing it at all or at its worst not even being here. But I think we just tend to have that thought process, which is, no, I'm just going to power on, I'm just going to power on. And then, for some people, you just get to the point and they just say, like, no, I'm not going to do this anymore.
And Katie, just from, and this is almost playing a devil's advocate role, as it were. But I remember finishing medical school, and I remember my final year, and I remember my first day on the wards, and it was a rabbit in headlight moment, as it were, and it took a few days for that to sink in. And I wanted to ask you, what's the general impression, or I know you've mentioned people are willing and excited to go in and help, but I know, and I know I'd be one of them, that I'd be very, very scared to be finishing med school, knowing what I know, and knowing enough to pass finals, and which is to be an FY1 doctor, which is what you're aiming to do, and to then be thrown into this absolute chaos of a situation that is being managed as best as we can. And I think I'd be petrified, actually, looking back to sort of 10, 11 years ago. And I don't know how the general atmosphere is amongst your cohort in that sense.
Definitely 100% terrified, as well as that willingness to go and help. Of course, in the back of our minds, we don't know what we're going into. The jobs are brand new. They wrote them almost overnight for us. Who knows what it will be like for us? I don't know. But I think we need to have that enthusiasm and motivation to get out there. But I do think, we can't be naive. It's not going to be a walk in the park, is it? So I think, yeah, absolutely, definitely scared, definitely terrified, but
yeah, no, I admire the I admire the aspiration, and I genuinely admire the courage, which I don't think I would have had at the time. And I think what I'd like to know really is, in terms of, say, if you are going into this now as a final year medical student, having just qualified, you go into this and you're generally scared and terrified. I know you said that university's offering some support further on down the line, more than would normally be be given. What are your thoughts regarding that, in terms of, is it okay? Do you think people will be saying, do you know what, I'm not ready for this? Can they say that? Is it an environment which they feel that they can say things like that?
So I think the first point to note is that us starting in this interim period, it is optional. So if for whatever reason you didn't feel just quite ready to start, you wanted time with your family, I think that's totally legitimate. You've got to do what's right for you.
Sure.
So I think it's really good, number one, that it is an opt-in rather than an opt-out. But I think number two, I don't think anyone would put shame on us if, let's say, on our first week, we were finding it really challenging and really difficult. I think everyone would totally understand. It's a scary thing to do anyway, especially now. And I do get a sense of community support. And I'd be very surprised if anyone said, no, just get on with it.
Yeah, I have to agree, actually. I don't think anyone... at least from the experience I have in my trust, and from what I've heard elsewhere as well, I don't think anyone would look to someone who's so admirably given their services so soon and willing to help to such an extent, to just be said to just carry on and get on with it. We're all in this. I don't think that would happen. I do think there would be quite a good level of support. And on that point, Amandip, I wanted to say, in at least my trust, and I think this is, I can speak for many others, or at least I hope I can, we have a new division, as it were, devoted to supporting our staff, and there is regular meetings that can be had with not just supervisors but actually dedicated teams to speak about any problems that you're having, or if things are getting too much. And I just wanted to know, is that something that you've heard about from other places as well?
I'll be honest, Paul, I haven't actually. No, I think that's really a good positive step going forward. I think that's immensely valuable to have that sort of go-to place. The only thing I would say, to sort of add even further value to that, and it's a little bit like, and I come from the private sector, in a lot of the services industry, and it's a bit like there's an old cliche that companies have a customer service or complaints department, but there's an argument to say the entire company, the entire organization is dedicated towards customer service. So I think it's a great first step, and there's a long way to go in terms of culture change and stigmas, etc. But certainly having that go-to place as a protected environment is great. And I would really fully expect that to sort of morph into that little pocket being all-encompassing to the whole organisation. I think that is really one of the things that we aim and strive for, as something that we try and champion at Doctors in Distress. So
yes.
It's great to hear of that, and fully supportive of that concept.
Yeah, I think almost as a full circle, it is a shame that it's taken something so drastic for to have all these wonderful safeguards in place, actually, and people are realizing that this can be a big problem for a lot of people and mentally, and it's just a real shame that it has taken to this. But I'm hoping, if there is some positive to come from this, that some of the safeguards and some of the support groups and all the camaraderie things that have been going on over the last few weeks, and no doubt will carry on for the next few weeks or months or however long this lasts for. Hopefully they will carry on and stay with us when all of this is finished.
Agreed.
There was a post a little while ago regarding care homes. I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to add about that, Amandip.
Yeah, so moving slightly off topic about sort of, I guess, doctors' health, the real touching stories I hear of people really sort of fearful for themselves and for loved ones in environments that are not really, we talked about hospitals and secondary care as being, the prime focus of attention right now, but, it's a virus. It's affecting everywhere, and wherever people are being looked after, particularly in care homes, there needs to be an equal amount of focus and attention given to those professionals who've also, and in many ways, if not more, have actually sacrificed their own lifestyles and family life to look after patients in care homes. I mean, I think I saw on the news either yesterday or today there was a group of 5 care workers who essentially have isolated themselves in the care home, away from their own children, their own parents, their own family, just to look after these elderly people. And it really touched something inside of me that said, wow, this is where we are now as a society. So I think a lot of the messages that we've given here are not just pertinent to doctors, nurses, or other healthcare professionals or non-healthcare professionals in secondary care, but really all environments, GP surgeries particularly, very, very isolating environments where, as we know, it can be 1 or 2 GPs completely on their own, and that brings its own challenges. So the isolation as well, for those working remotely, is even more paramount as well. So I just wanted to just highlight that, and thanks for bringing that up as well.
Yeah, no, I echo that, because I've got close friends as well whose family also work in care home environments, and it's not an easy thing to do in this circumstance, in this current climate, and it's a very admirable thing, and we often forget about that. I know that the media is very much focused on what's going on within the hospitals and what's going on the front line and all these things, but that's actually a certain perspective, and there's a lot of things going on out there, and a lot of people doing some absolutely incredible, amazing things for caring for others that isn't publicized, and I think they deserve all the support and and help that they can get, and I want to thank them all for that.
Absolutely.
Thank you both so much, and I will leave links to Doctors in Distress website in the podcast description as well, and also some more other useful links for the COVID-19 outbreak, including NHS links too. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both so much. I do hope it's been an informative podcast and one that has been useful. And if you are a key worker or NHS worker who is struggling with the current situation, please do speak to someone. There is help out there. I will leave links to Doctors in Distress website, which is a fantastic resource for anyone looking to receive help. And also I'll put links to the NHS guidelines as well for anyone listening who wants more advice regarding coronavirus, and also what to do if you're a high-risk individual too. That's it for this week. Please do follow me on Instagram at A Doctor's View, and please do email me with any questions or any topics that you'd like me to discuss in the future at adoctorsview@gmail.com. As always, in this current horrible environment, I want to thank everyone who is continuing to work on the front line, and also all the key workers too who are helping to keep this country running. Please do look after yourselves, and in this time of crisis, please do also look after each other too. I'll join you again next time. I'm Dr. Livios. Goodbye.